Alright, so in this video we are going to learn about squares, rectangle, and rhombi, not rhombuses. Some important things, they're all quadrilateral, so they have four sides, and then they're also all parallelograms. So all the properties you learned about parallelograms are still going to be true in these shapes. We're just going to have more specific characteristics that we'll have to use, okay? So first off, we're going to start with a rectangle, and so this is a rectangle. With a rectangle, all we know our opposite sides are congruent. And that's nothing new from a parallelogram. So this side is the same as this side is the same as this. If they give you equations, you set them equal. Okay? We do know something more specific about angles. We know they have all right angles, which means I have a box in this corner, box in this corner, box in this corner, and box in this corner, and they're all 90 degrees. Okay, so a rectangle has all 90-degree angles. So that's something more specific. Okay, the diagonals, they're gonna first off, they're gonna be congruent. Okay, so this whole diagonal is gonna be equal to this whole diagonal, okay? So if they give you the length of all of those, you're going to be setting them equal, okay? The second thing that happens is they bisect each other. And that was also true in a parallelogram, okay? So remember when we did this is congruent to this? Well, now we can take it a little step further, and we know that that piece is going to be congruent to that piece because the diagonals are congruent, okay? So you're not going to have two tick marks like you saw with parallelograms, okay? So each piece of the diagonal is congruent. So a cool thing that happens is you have isosceles triangles. You got 4 of them, okay? So technically, these are going to be the same angles. These are going to be the same angles because you've got a lot of isosceles triangles going on. You also have vertical angles. Well, if I can find my mouse. So vertical angles here and here, okay? So lots of cool things happen with rectangles. But let's move on to a rhombus, okay? We know something important about a rhombus. They actually have all the same sides. So all sides are congruent. So this is the same as this, which is the same as this, and the same as this. So again, you're going to set your sides congruent or equal to. We don't know anything about the angles in a rhombus, though, so we're going to use the same ones from a parallelogram. So the opposite angles are congruent, and then we know same side interior equal 180. So these angles are congruent, this angle is congruent to this one, and then these two equal 180. So that's all based on parallelograms, okay? We do know some more specific things about the diagonals though, okay? We know they bisect each other because that's what a parallelogram did. So this is congruent to this piece is congruent to that piece. They are not going to be congruent. That's why I put that not there, okay? So in a rhombus, this really long piece is never going to be equal to this same piece, okay? But there is one third thing that happens. The diagonals are perpendicular. So remember that symbol was the upside down T. So what you know is you've got a 90-degree angle there, which means you have a 90-degree angle here, and there. Okay? So notice we've got 4 small triangles in the middle. Okay? So if I tell you this degree, you can use that 90 knowledge to find another missing degree. Okay? And then you've got alternate interior angles, okay? So a lot can happen when you cut a quadrilateral into pieces and you actually end up getting triangles, okay? All right, that's all we know about a rhombus. Moving on to the last, most specific shape, which is a square, okay? So a square is like if a rectangle and a rhombus had a baby, okay? It's got characteristics of all of them, okay? So first off, I know the sides are congruent. So all sides are congruent. So that, and that all have the same side. Okay? Angles, I know they're all 90 degrees. So they're all right angles. So I got a right angle, a right angle, a right angle, and a right angle. Okay? And then the diagonals takes on both characteristics of those. So I know they're going to bisect. I know they're going to be perpendicular. And I know they're going to be congruent. Okay? So I know they're going to bisect each other. Now, since they were congruent, I know we're going to have isosceles triangles going on. And then I'm also going to have a right angle everywhere in that middle angle. Okay? So again, I've got isosceles triangles going on. And I've got vertical angles and all that jazz. Okay? So we're going to use our knowledge of triangles and quadrilaterals with these. Okay? So those are the properties of all of them. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, you're going to have to kind of memorize those and practice with them. But if you turn, oh no, it's joke time. He took the rhombus. Ha 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 ha. Is that it? What's going on? Okay, sorry. So we got one more page, turn it over. So I want you to name each parallelogram based on just the markings, okay? So you're going to name it a square, a rectangle, a rhombus, a parallelogram, or just a quadrilateral if you can't tell a lot about it, okay? So why don't you press pause and try this whole back page. This one is talking about you're going to make a mark if it's true. So are the angles congruent? Mark, 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 okay? So try that back page, press pause, and I will go over the answers with you guys. Number one is a rhombus because you had a perpendicular or your diagonals were perpendicular, so you either had to pick a square or a rhombus, and since these diagonals were different, it was a rhombus. This was a square because it told you it was a parallelogram, so you know that this side is the same as this, and this is the same as this. And then opposite angles will be congruent, so you would end up making a square. With a rectangle, you could know that this angle was 90 because this one was, since it was a parallelogram. And again, they're all 90, so you could say it was a rectangle. On number 4, you know opposite sides are the same, so you can make those marks and then say that it was a rhombus because they were all the same sides. This one would be a rectangle because we don't have a perpendicular diagonal, but they are the same, so it'd be a rectangle. Lastly, a square because the diagonals are perpendicular and the same side, okay? So that's how you can determine what a shape is based on the markings, okay? Now on the bottom part, got a little bit tricky here, and I'll talk about that in a second. So all angles are congruent in a rectangle and a rhombus. But hold on, not a rhombus. It is true in a square, not a rhombus. All sides are congruent in a rhombus and a square. The diagonals are congruent in a rectangle and a square. And then the diagonals are perpendicular in a rhombus and a square. Now what this means, the diagonals are bisecting the vertex angles. That means do the diagonals cut the angle in half, okay? And that is true in a rhombus and a square. So let me kind of go back to our notes and kind of make some marks. So what that means is that this diagonal is going to make this angle congruent to this angle, okay? Same thing, this diagonal is going to cut this angle and that angle in half, okay? So that's what it means that the diagonals are going to bisect the angles. So that's going to be true in a rhombus and even true in a square. So this angle is going to be congruent to this one. This angle is going to be congruent to that one. Now the reason it doesn't happen in a rectangle is because this obviously is a very acute angle and this one's bigger, okay? So that's a little bit of a clear up on that. And then all of these properties down here were all the properties of a parallelogram, so it was obviously going to be true in all these shapes because a rectangle and a rhombus and a square are all a kind of a parallelogram, okay? All right, so those are all the properties of squares, rectangles, and parallelograms, and now you are ready to practice. So thank you for watching. Let me know if you have any questions.